She hadn't planned on standing out. In fact, she'd chosen the farthest seat in the auditorium, the kind of seat where proud mothers sat quietly, clutching programs, pretending their hands weren't trembling with emotion. She wore jeans, a simple black jacket, and her hair tied back, nothing that would draw a second glance in a crowd of hundreds. But fate had a habit of refusing her anonymity. The graduation hall at Naval Training Command was electric, cadets marching, families cheering, instructors calling orders sharp enough to slice the air. Her son, Cadet First Class Mason Hale, stood in the fourth row, stiff and proud in his crisp dress uniform. She smiled, a small, private smile only a mother could understand. She had traveled across the country just to see this one moment. Just to sit in the audience, to clap with the other parents, to watch her boy step into the life he had worked so painfully hard to earn. She was determined to remain invisible. That lasted exactly 8 minutes. A group of senior officers entered from the side doors, 3 captains and 1 admiral in immaculate white. The room stiffened. Even families straightened in their seats. Admiral Jonathan Pierce was a name whispered with respect, the kind of man whose presence rearranged oxygen. But she didn't notice any of that. She just tugged up her sleeve. The room was warm, and she didn't think much of it. A small gesture, innocent, a simple adjustment of fabric. The Admiral noticed. His eyes locked onto the inside of her forearm, where a faint ink trident rested. Not flashy, not decorative, old, weathered, the kind of tattoo you don't buy, you earn. A seal trident, but not just any trident. His breath left him in a single, stunned exhale. Because above the trident was a mark only 12 people in the world possessed. TX-7, a designation for the most classified covert unit in SEAL history. Officially disbanded, unofficially, never spoken of. And only one member had ever been female. His strides across the aisle drew the attention of every officer in the room. Even cadets noticed the sudden tension rippling outward like a shockwave. Families tilted their heads. Mason's eyes flicked toward the movement, confused. The Admiral stopped directly beside her row. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. "Ma'am," he said quietly, voice cracking in a way no one had heard before, "is that real?" Every nearby officer froze. They recognized the mark now. She met his stare calmly, her voice soft. "It was real enough when I earned it." The captain stiffened, eyes widening in disbelief. A couple of families whispered. Mason's jaw fell slightly open as he realized the Admiral, a 4-star admiral, was speaking to his mother. Then the impossible happened. Admiral Pierce straightened, clicked his heels together, and snapped a full, formal salute. Right there, in front of the entire hall. To a woman in jeans sitting quietly in the back row. Gasps rippled forward like a wave. Cadets froze mid-breath. Mason looked like he forgot how gravity worked. She didn't rise. She didn't bow. She simply nodded. "Please don't make a scene, Admiral. I'm just here to watch my son graduate." But the scene had already begun. The auditorium was no longer a graduation hall. It was silent, tense, and charged with an invisible force, as if every person inside sensed something extraordinary was unfolding and didn't dare breathe too loudly. Admiral Pierce lowered his salute with the kind of reverence usually reserved for legends, not living people. The officers behind him exchanged looks, confusion first, then shock, then something closer to awe. Mason Hale, standing in formation, struggled to keep his composure. His eyes darted between the Admiral and his mother, his pulse hammering so violently he thought he might faint. His mother, his quiet, private, never talked about her past mother, was being saluted by the highest-ranking SEAL in the room. And Admiral Pierce wasn't finished. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady now but softer than any of the cadets had ever heard, "if I may, could we speak privately after the ceremony?" She gave a small sigh, the kind she used when people overcomplicated things, and nodded. "Fine, but let the graduation continue. My son earned this moment." The Admiral turned sharply toward the stage. "Carry on," he ordered. The officers scrambled, instructors shouted commands, and the ceremony resumed, but nothing returned to normal. Not really. The families kept glancing toward her. Cadets stole looks like they were checking if a ghost had materialized among them. Even the color guard seemed a little shaky. Mason, now stepping forward as names were called, felt heat rising up his neck. He didn't know whether to feel proud, terrified, or deeply confused. Maybe all three. When his name boomed through the speakers, Cadet First Class Mason Hale, the crowd erupted in applause. But their eyes weren't on him. They were on the woman in the last row who stood slowly to clap. Admiral Pierce turned as Mason reached the stage, his expression unreadable, but definitely not indifferent. He studied the young man, his posture, his discipline, the way he accepted his certificate. Whatever the Admiral expected, Mason exceeded it. When the ceremony ended and cadets flooded into the aisles, cheering and snapping photos with families, Mason ran toward her. He stopped just short when Admiral Pierce stepped into view beside her. "Mom, what is going on?" Mason whispered, eyes wide. She placed a gentle hand on his cheek. "I'll explain later." The Admiral cleared his throat. "Mason, your mother is—" She cut him off sharply. "Admiral." One word, a warning. Pierce closed his mouth immediately. She turned to her son with the smallest smile. "Let's just say I worked with the Navy a long time ago. Nothing for you to worry about today." But the Admiral wasn't having it. Not after seeing that tattoo. Not after recognizing the face he'd only seen in classified files stamped with top secret, never disclosed. "Commander Hale," he said quietly, using the rank she'd buried decades ago, "Texas 7 was never just work. You saved an entire carrier group." Mason jerked his head toward her in disbelief. "You, what?" She exhaled, annoyed. "Jonathan, stop." But Admiral Pierce shook his head. "No, the Navy owes you more than silence." And then he said the words that made Mason's knees go weak. "You weren't just in Texas 7. You led it." She closed her eyes as the room fell into absolute stillness. Her cover, her quiet life, was gone. And her son was seeing her for the first time.